It was almost noon, and the jungle was very still, very silent. Heat waves shimmered along the railway embankment where it cut a path through the tall evergreen trees. The railway lines were two straight black serpents disappearing into the tunnel in the hillside. Ranji stood near the cutting, waiting for the midday train. It wasn't a station and he wasn't catching a train. He was waiting so he could watch the steam engine come roaring out of the tunnel. He had cycled out of town and taken the jungle path until he had come to a small village. He had left the cycle there and walked over a low, scrub-covered hill and down to the tunnel exit. Now he looked up. He had heard, in the distance, the shrill whistle of the engine. He couldn't see anything because the train was approaching from the other side of the hill. But presently a sound like distant thunder came from the tunnel, and he knew the train was coming through. A second or two later the steam engine shot out of the tunnel, snorting and puffing like some green, black and gold dragon, some beautiful monster out of Ranji's dreams. Showering sparks right and left, it roared a challenge to the jungle. Instinctively Ranji stepped back a few paces. Waves of hot steam struck him in the face. Even the trees seemed to flinch from the noise and heat. And then the train had gone, leaving only a plume of smoke to drift lazily over the tall shisham trees. The jungle was still again. No one moved. Ranji turned from watching the drifting smoke and began walking along the embankment towards the tunnel. It grew darker the further he walked, and when he had gone about 20 yards it became pitch black. He had to turn and look back at the opening to make sure that there was a speck of daylight in the distance. Ahead of him, the tunnel's other opening was also a small round circle of light. The walls of the tunnel were damp and sticky. A bat flew past. A lizard scuttled between the lines. Coming straight from the darkness into the light, Ranji was dazzled by the sudden glare. He put a hand up to shade his eyes and looked up at the scrub-covered hillside, and he thought he saw something moving between the trees. It was just a flash of gold and black, and a long swishing tail. It was there between the trees for a second or two, and then it was gone. About 50 feet from the entrance to the tunnel stood the watchman's hut. Marigolds grew in front of the hut, and at the back there was a small vegetable patch. It was the watchman's duty to inspect the tunnel and keep it clear of obstacles. Every day, before the train came through, he would walk the length of the tunnel. If all was well, he would return to his hut and take a nap. If something was wrong, he would walk back up the line and wave a red flag and the engine driver would slow down. At night, the watchman lit an oil lamp and made a similar inspection. If there was any danger to the train, he'd go back up the line and wave his lamp to the approaching engine. If all was well, he'd hang his lamp at the door of his hut and go to sleep. He was just settling down on his cot for an afternoon nap when he saw the boy come out of the tunnel. He waited until the boy was only a few feet away and then said, "Welcome, welcome. I don't often get visitors. Sit down for a while and tell me why you were inspecting my tunnel." "Is it your tunnel?" asked Ranji. "It is," said the watchman. "It is truly my tunnel, since no one else will have anything to do with it. I have only lent it to the government." Ranji sat down on the edge of the cot. "I wanted to see the train come through," he said. "And then, when it had gone, I decided to walk through the tunnel. And what did you find in it? Nothing. It was very dark. But when I came out, I thought I saw an animal up on the hill, but I'm not sure. It moved off very quickly. It was a leopard you saw, said the watchman. My leopard. Do you own a leopard too? I do. And do you lend it to the government? I do not. Is it dangerous? Not if you leave it alone. It comes this way for a few days every month because there are still deer in this jungle, and the deer is its natural prey. It keeps away from people. Have you been here a long time? Asked Ranji. Many years. My name is Kishan Singh. Mine is Ranji. There is one train during the day. And there is one train during the night. Have you seen the night mail come through the tunnel? No. At what time does it come? About 9 o'clock, if it isn't late. You could come and sit here with me, if you like. And after it has gone, I will take you home. I will ask my parents, said Ranji. Will it be safe? It is safer in the jungle than in the town. No rascals out here. Only last week, when I went into the town, I had my pocket picked. Leopards don't pick pockets. Kishan Singh stretched himself out on his cot. And now I am going to take a nap, my friend. It is too hot to be up and about in the afternoon. Everyone goes to sleep in the afternoon, complained Ranji. My father lies down as soon as he's had his lunch. Well, the animals also rest in the heat of the day. It is only the tribe of boys who cannot or will not rest. Kishan Singh placed a large banana leaf over his face to keep away the flies and was soon snoring gently. Ranji stood up, looking up and down the railway tracks. Then he began walking back to the village. The following evening, towards dusk, as the flying foxes swooped silently out of the trees, Ranji made his way to the watchman's hut. It had been a long hot day, but now the earth was cooling and a light breeze was moving through the trees. It carried with it the scent of mango blossom, the promise of rain. Kishan Singh was waiting for Ranji. He had watered his small garden and the flowers looked cool and fresh. A kettle was boiling on an oil stove. I am making tea, he said. There is nothing like a glass of hot sweet tea while waiting for a train. They drank their tea, listening to the sharp notes of the tailor bird and the noisy chatter of the seven sisters. As the brief twilight faded, most of the birds fell silent. Kishan lit his oil lamp and said it was time for him to inspect the tunnel. He moved off towards the dark entrance, while Ranji sat on the cot, sipping tea. In the dark, the trees seemed to move closer. And the night life of the forest was conveyed on the breeze, the sharp call of a barking deer, the cry of a fox, the quaint tonk-tonk of a nightjar. There were some sounds that Ranji would not recognize, sounds that came from the trees, creakings and whisperings, as though the trees were coming alive, stretching their limbs in the dark, shifting a little, flexing their fingers. Kishan Singh stood outside the tunnel, trimming his lamp. The night sounds were familiar to him and he did not give them much thought, but something else, a padded footfall, a rustle of dry leaves, made him stand still for a few seconds, peering into the darkness. Then, humming softly, he returned to where Ranji was waiting. Then minutes remained for the night mail to arrive. As the watchman sat down on the cot beside Ranji, a new sound reached both of them quite distinctly, a rhythmic sawing sound, as of someone cutting through the branch of a tree. "What's that?" whispered Ranji. "It's the leopard," said Kishan Singh. "I think it's in the tunnel. The train will soon be here." "Yes, my friend. And if we don't drive the leopard out of the tunnel, it will be run over by the engine." "But won't it attack us if we try to drive it out?" asked Ranji, beginning to share the watchman's concern. "It knows me well. We have seen each other many times. I don't think it will attack. Even so, I will take my axe along." "You had better stay here, Ranji." "No, I will come too. It will be better than sitting here alone in the dark." "All right, but stay close behind me. And remember, there is nothing to fear." Raising his lamp, Kishan Singh walked into the tunnel, shouting at the top of his voice to try and scare away the animal. Ranji followed close behind. But he found he was unable to do any shouting. His throat had gone quite dry. They had gone about 20 paces into the tunnel when the light from the lamp fell upon the leopard. It was crouching between the tracks, only 15 feet away from them. Baring its teeth and snarling, it went down on its belly, tail twitching. Ranji felt sure it was going to spring at them. Kishan Singh and Ranji both shouted together. Their voices rang through the tunnel. And the leopard, uncertain as to how many terrifying humans were there in front of him, turned swiftly and disappeared into the darkness. To make sure it had gone, Ranji and the watchman walked the length of the tunnel. When they returned to the entrance, the rails were beginning to hum. They knew the train was coming. Ranji put his hand to one of the rails and felt its tremor. He heard the distant rumble of the train. And then the engine came round the bend, hissing at them, scattering sparks into the darkness, defying the jungle as it rode through the steep sides of the cutting. It charged straight into the tunnel, thundering past Ranji like the beautiful dragon of his dreams. And when it had gone, the silence returned and the forest seemed to breathe, to live again. Only the rails still trembled with the passing of the train. They trembled again to the passing of the same train, almost a week later, when Ranji and his father were both traveling in it. Ranji's father was scribbling in a notebook, doing his accounts. How boring of him, thought Ranji as he sat near an open window staring out at the darkness. His father was going to Delhi on a business trip and had decided to take the boy along. "It's time you learned something about the business," he had said, to Ranji's dismay. The night mail rushed through the forest with its hundreds of passengers. The carriage wheels beat out a steady rhythm on the rails. Tiny flickering lights came and went as they passed small villages on the fringe of the jungle. Ranji heard the rumble as the train passed over a small bridge. It was too dark to see the hut near the cutting, but he knew they must be approaching the tunnel. He strained his eyes looking out into the night, and then, just as the engine let out a shrill whistle, Ranji saw the lamp. He couldn't see Kishan Singh, but he saw the lamp, and he knew that his friend was out there. The train went into the tunnel and out again. It left the jungle behind and thundered across the endless plains. And Ranji stared out at the darkness, thinking of the lonely cutting in the forest, and the watchman with the lamp who would always remain a firefly for those traveling thousands, as he lit up the darkness for steam engines and leopards.